What if I told you that the most advanced medicine in the universe is not being developed in laboratories here on Earth, but that it has existed for millennia, and part of it is now being confirmed by our own science? Think about this for a moment. The World Health Organization estimates that more than 2 billion people worldwide live with some form of chronic health condition: heart disease, diabetes, depression, anxiety, cancer, numbers that grow every year despite all the technological advances of conventional medicine. Something is being left behind. Something fundamental. The Arcturians, beings of a galactic consciousness that many scholars, channelers, and researchers describe as guardians of human development, perceive the body in a completely different way than we do. For them, the human body is not just a collection of organs, tissues, and cells. It is a multidimensional interface, a living instrument that receives, processes, and emits frequency at all times. And that is precisely why treating only the physical symptom without considering the other levels of this system is like trying to fix a computer by replacing only the screen when the problem lies in the code. In this video, you will discover what Arcturian medicine teaches us about the body. And more than that, you will understand how to apply these principles in your life today, in a practical, accessible way, backed by what modern science is already beginning to confirm. If you are between 25 and 55 years old, if you care about your health, your family's health, and feel that something important is missing from conventional approaches, this video was made for you. Before we continue, I have a favor to ask. Hit the like button right now. It seems simple, but that gesture makes all the difference in helping this content reach more people who need this information. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what's coming will change the way you see your own health. Let's begin. The body is not just physical. The Arcturian view of health. Let me ask you a question that may seem simple, but carries enormous depth. When you think about your body, what comes to mind? Most people think of muscles, bones, blood, maybe cholesterol, blood pressure, routine lab tests. And that makes perfect sense. That's how we were taught to see the body since childhood. Western medicine, with all its brilliance and undeniable advances, built a model based on matter, on what can be seen, measured, cut open, and analyzed in a laboratory. But the Arcturians start from a completely different principle. For this galactic consciousness, the physical body is only the densest layer of a far more complex system. Imagine an onion with many layers. What we call the body would be the outermost layer, the most visible one. Beneath it exist other bodies: the emotional, the mental, the energetic, the spiritual. And all of them communicate constantly, influencing one another directly. This is not unfounded mysticism. Quantum physics, one of the most respected fields of modern science, has already demonstrated that matter, at the subatomic level, is essentially energy in a state of vibration. German physicist Max Planck, father of quantum theory and Nobel Prize winner, said something that deeply resonates with Arcturian thought. Matter as such does not exist. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration. In other words, at the core of everything, what we have is frequency. The Arcturians have been working with this understanding far longer than our science has. They developed health systems that consider the human being as an integrated whole, and that is why, from their perspective, there is no purely physical disease. Every manifestation in the body carries a message from a subtler level. A liver problem may be connected to emotional patterns of suppressed anger. Chronic back pain may reflect an emotional burden the person has been carrying for years. Respiratory issues may be linked to a difficulty in receiving, in letting life in. This does not mean you should abandon your doctor or ignore a diagnosis. Absolutely not. It means that treating only the physical level is treating half the problem. A very concrete example: studies conducted by the HeartMath Institute in the United States demonstrated that chronic emotional states such as stress and anxiety directly alter heart rhythm, reduce immunity, increase inflammation in the body, and accelerate cellular aging. In other words, what you feel, your internal state, literally reprograms your body's biology. That is Arcturian medicine being confirmed by conventional science. And here is the most important point of this chapter. If the body is a multidimensional interface, then caring for health means caring for all of its dimensions. It is not enough to take the right medication if you continue feeding an emotional pattern that generates inflammation. It is not enough to exercise if your energy field is collapsing due to toxic relationships, overwork, or chronic sleep deprivation. The Arcturian vision invites us to expand our concept of health, to move from "I'm fine because my tests are normal" to "I'm well because my energy is flowing, my body is in balance, my emotions are integrated, and my mind is clear." And believe me, that state is possible. It is not a privilege reserved for the few. It is the natural state of the human being when they begin to understand themselves for what they truly are. A multidimensional being, operating on far more layers than we can see with the naked eye. Frequency is medicine. How vibration heals from the inside out. Now that you understand the body is far more than matter, the natural question arises: if we are energy, if we are frequency, what does that mean in practice for our health? Let me give you an example that will make all of this much more concrete. In 1988, Japanese researcher Masaru Emoto conducted an experiment that stunned the scientific world. He exposed water samples to different stimuli, words written on paper, music, human intentions, and then froze those samples to analyze the formation of the crystals. The result was extraordinary. Water exposed to words like love and gratitude formed symmetrical, geometrically perfect crystals. Water exposed to words like hate and anger formed chaotic, fragmented structures with no defined shape. Why does this matter to you? Because your body is composed of approximately 70% water. And if the molecular structure of water responds to frequencies, intentions, and emotions, imagine what happens to your organism when you live in a chronic state of fear, anger, or sadness. And imagine, on the other hand, what happens when you cultivate gratitude, love, and inner peace. This is what the Arcturians call vibrational medicine. The principle is simple yet profound. Every organ, every tissue, every cell in your body vibrates at a specific frequency when healthy. When that frequency is altered by toxins, negative emotions, inadequate nutrition, chronic stress, the cell enters a state of imbalance. And prolonged imbalance in any system leads to collapse. In the human body, that collapse has a name: disease. Arcturian medicine works with the restoration of these natural frequencies. And what is most fascinating is that modern science is arriving at the same conclusions through different pathways. The field of medical bioelectronics, for example, has already demonstrated that cancer cells vibrate at significantly different frequencies than healthy cells. Researchers at Cornell University in the United States identified that precancerous cellular changes can be detected solely through the analysis of electrical frequencies emitted by tissue before any physical symptom appears. Think about the impact of that. Diagnosis by frequency, treatment by frequency. This is not science fiction. It is the path medicine is walking, and the Arcturians have been on it for millennia. But you do not need to wait for the medicine of the future to start working with frequency right now. There are practical and accessible ways to elevate your body's vibration in daily life. Sound therapy, for example, is one of the oldest and most powerful. The so-called binaural frequencies, specific sounds that induce brain states of relaxation, healing, and focus, already have robust scientific backing. Studies published in the Journal of Evidence-Based Integrative Medicine show that exposure to 432 Hz significantly reduces stress markers in the body, lowers blood pressure, and improves sleep quality. The Arcturians use sound as one of their primary healing tools. Not coincidentally, virtually every ancestral healing tradition on Earth, from indigenous chants to Tibetan mantras, from sacred bells to shamanic drums, uses sound as a vehicle for biological transformation. It was not superstition, it was applied science, long before we had instruments to measure it. And here is something I want you to carry through life. Your voice is also frequency. The words you speak to yourself every day. I can't do this. I'm always sick. My family has a history of high blood pressure, so I'm going to have it too. Those words are not neutral. They carry frequency. They impact your biofield, your biochemistry, your nervous system. Changing your inner dialogue is not naive positive thinking. It is literally changing the frequency with which you program your own body. In the next chapter, we will dive deeper into that field of energy that surrounds and permeates your body, the biofield, and understand why it may be the key to preventing disease before it ever manifests physically. The human biofield, the energy field that science is beginning to confirm. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt something was wrong, without anyone saying a word? Or gotten close to someone and felt a heavy, dense energy that made you uncomfortable for no apparent reason? And on the other side, have you ever been in the presence of someone whose energy was so light, so welcoming, that you felt good simply by being near them? That is not imagination. That is not spiritual romanticism. You were perceiving, intuitively, something that science already has a name and a measurement for: the human biofield. The biofield is the electromagnetic field generated by the organism itself, produced primarily by the heart and the brain, but also by every cell in the body. The heart, for example, generates an electromagnetic field that extends up to 1.5 meters around the body in all directions. This has been measured and documented by the HeartMath Institute using high-precision equipment. That field carries information about your emotional state, your physical health, and your level of internal coherence, and it influences not only you, but the people around you. The Arcturians describe the biofield as the energetic mold of the physical body. Before a disease manifests in the tissues, it has already manifested in the biofield. It is as if the energy field were a hologram of the body, and any distortion in that hologram, if left uncorrected, eventually solidifies into physical form. This explains why so many people develop illness during moments of deep emotional crisis, grief, separation, or burnout. The biofield collapses, and the physical body follows. Conventional science is arriving at similar conclusions. Researcher Donna Eden, in collaboration with American universities, documented specific patterns of biofield disruption that precede the onset of autoimmune diseases, cancer, and cardiovascular conditions. More recently, researchers at the University of Arizona developed an entire field of study called biofield science, recognized by the National Institutes of Health in the United States as a legitimate area of medical research. But what, exactly, disrupts the biofield? The list is more every day than you might imagine. Chronic stress is one of the greatest disruptors of the biofield. When you live in a constant state of alertness, that feeling that there is always something urgent to resolve, that rest is a luxury you cannot afford, your autonomic nervous system remains in a sympathetic state, continuously releasing cortisol and adrenaline. This creates a kind of noise in the biofield, interfering with communication between cells and drastically reducing the organism's capacity for self-regulation. Beyond stress, other factors that compromise the biofield include excessive exposure to artificial electromagnetic fields, such as prolonged use of a cell phone close to the body, Wi-Fi routers in the bedroom during sleep, and excessive hours in front of screens. Ultra-processed food, which beyond its known physical damage, alters the gut microbiome in ways that directly impact neurotransmitter production and the quality of the energy field. And toxic relationships and negative environments, which literally drain the coherence of your biofield through low-frequency interactions. Now, the good news, just as the biofield can be disrupted, it can also be restored. And there are very practical ways to do this. The first is contact with nature, what the Arcturians call reconnection with the stellar intelligence of the Earth. Walking barefoot on grass or sand, a process known as grounding or earthing, has been studied in at least 21 published scientific papers demonstrating reduced inflammation, improved sleep quality, regulation of cortisol, and normalization of circadian rhythms. The Earth's soil emits a natural electromagnetic frequency of approximately 7.83 Hz, known as the Schumann resonance, which is in perfect resonance with the natural frequency of the human brain in a state of deep relaxation. The second practice is cardiac coherence meditation, a specific technique in which you consciously regulate your breathing at a rhythm of 5 seconds inhaling and 5 seconds exhaling, creating a synchronization between the heart and the brain that restores biofield coherence within minutes. Studies from the HeartMath Institute show that just 5 minutes of this practice per day are sufficient to reduce inflammation markers and improve heart rate variability, one of the most precise indicators of cardiovascular health and longevity. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt your biofield disrupted? That sensation of being out of yourself, drained of energy, even without having done anything physically exhausting? Because if so, now you know exactly what was happening. Food as light code. What you eat programs your body. Let me make a statement that may sound radical at first, but makes complete sense once you understand what we have been building together throughout this video. You do not eat just to nourish yourself. You eat to program yourself. Every food that enters your body carries a frequency. It carries information, and that information is read by your cells, your DNA, your nervous system, and translated into signals that determine whether your organism will operate in a mode of healing and regeneration, or in a mode of inflammation and degeneration. The Arcturians describe foods as light codes, packages of vibrational information that, when introduced into the organism, reprogram the biofield from the inside out. And the closer a food is to its natural form, the richer and more coherent the code it carries. This has a very solid scientific foundation. The field of nutrigenomics, one of the most revolutionary areas of modern medicine, studies exactly how the nutrients in food interact with DNA and regulate gene expression. In other words, what you eat does not just nourish your body. It literally turns genes on and off. Genes for inflammation, for longevity, for cardiovascular risk, for cancer predisposition. You are not a prisoner of your genetics. You are its programmer, and your fork is one of the most powerful tools you have. A concrete and striking example: resveratrol, found in red grapes, red wine, and some red berries, activates a group of genes called sirtuins, the same genes associated with longevity in animal studies conducted by MIT and Harvard University. Another example is sulforaphane, found in broccoli, kale, and cabbage, which has demonstrated in clinical studies the ability to inhibit the proliferation of cancer cells and increase the production of liver detoxification enzymes. These are not expensive supplements or experimental treatments. They are foods that are probably available at the nearest market to you right now. But here is the point the Arcturians emphasize far more strongly than conventional nutrition. It is not only what you eat, but the frequency of what you eat. Ultra-processed foods, those that have gone through multiple industrial stages, loaded with preservatives, colorings, stabilizers, and refined sugar, arrive in your organism with an extremely low frequency. Physician and researcher David R. Hawkins, in his work on levels of consciousness and frequency, described how dead foods, without life, without enzymes, without coherent vibrational information, literally lower the energy field of the organism that consumes them. On the other hand, fresh, living, colorful foods, fruits, vegetables, seeds, herbs, arrive loaded with biophotons. Biophotons are particles of light emitted by living organisms, and human body cells also emit and receive them as a form of communication. Researcher Fritz Albert Popp from the University of Kaiserslautern in Germany dedicated decades to the study of biophotons and demonstrated that healthy cells emit light in a coherent and organized manner, and that the consumption of living foods increases this cellular coherence. Eating living foods is, literally, feeding your body with light. Now, let me be practical. because understanding the theory is pointless if it does not translate into real choices in your daily life. 3 Arcturian principles of nutrition you can start applying today. The first is the principle of color and vitality. The more colorful and varied your plate, the more diverse the vibrational information you are introducing into your organism. Each plant pigment, the lycopene in tomatoes, the curcumin in turmeric, the anthocyanin in acai, carries a specific code with antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and biofield regulating action. The second is the principle of conscious eating. The Arcturians teach that the internal state with which you eat directly influences how your body processes the food. Eating in a hurry, in a state of stress or anger, activates the sympathetic nervous system and literally shuts down digestive processes, reducing nutrient absorption and increasing intestinal permeability, which opens the door to systemic inflammation. Taking a 30-second pause before eating, breathing deeply, and giving thanks for the food is not an empty ritual. It is a real physiological intervention. The third is the principle of reducing the processed. There is no need to be radical overnight. Abrupt transformations rarely sustain themselves, but gradually replacing one ultra-processed food per day with a more natural version is already enough to initiate measurable cellular reprogramming within weeks. The question I leave for you to reflect on, and that I would love for you to answer in the comments, is this: if your plate today were a reflection of the frequency you want to vibrate tomorrow, what would you change? Emotions are biology. How feelings create or cure disease. I want to begin this chapter with a statistic that stopped many people when it was published. According to research from Harvard University, between 80% and 90% of all medical consultations have an emotional component as a root cause or aggravating factor. This is not coincidence. It is not weakness. It is pure biology. And the Arcturians have known this far longer than we have imagined. From the perspective of Arcturian galactic consciousness, emotions are not merely subjective experiences that happen in the mind. They are real biochemical events with direct and measurable impact on every system of your organism. Every emotion you feel triggers a cascade of chemical reactions that literally alters the composition of your blood, the activity of your genes, the functioning of your immune system, and the structure of your brain. Neuroscientist Candace Pert was one of the pioneers to demonstrate this irrefutably. In her book, Molecules of Emotion, she described how each emotion corresponds to a specific set of neuropeptides, molecules produced by the brain that circulate through the entire organism and fit into receptors present in virtually every cell of the body. This means that when you feel chronic fear, anger, or sadness, those emotions do not stay trapped in your head. They travel through your entire body, cell by cell, reprogramming the biochemistry of every tissue they touch. Let us make this even more concrete with specific examples. Chronic stress, that low-level tension that never completely disappears, the constant survival mode, elevates cortisol levels in a sustained way. And chronically elevated cortisol does devastating things to the organism. It suppresses the immune system, increases systemic inflammation, degrades muscle tissue, favors the accumulation of visceral fat, the most dangerous kind, the kind that surrounds internal organs, and accelerates the shortening of telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes. Shorter telomeres mean accelerated cellular aging. In other words, chronic stress ages you from the inside out before any sign appears on the outside. Suppressed anger has a specific address in the body, the liver. Ancient Chinese medicine, which shares many points of convergence with Arcturian teachings, describes the liver as the organ that stores unexpressed anger. Modern science is beginning to confirm this. Studies show that patients with chronic hepatitis and cirrhosis present significantly higher rates of repressed anger and difficulty with emotional expression than the general population. Coincidence? Unlikely. Unresolved grief and sadness directly compromise the lungs and respiratory system. Physician and researcher Gabor Mate, in his book, When the Body Says No, documented dozens of cases in which serious autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, developed in people who had spent years suppressing emotions, prioritizing the needs of others over their own, never allowing themselves to feel and express what they were truly experiencing. And chronic fear, perhaps the most prevalent emotion in contemporary society, lives in the kidneys, according to Arcturian medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. Physiologically, constant fear keeps the adrenal glands, located above the kidneys, in a state of hyperactivation, continuously pumping adrenaline. The result is elevated blood pressure, insomnia, generalized anxiety, and a nervous system that simply can no longer distinguish a real threat from an imaginary worry. But here is where the conversation shifts, because everything I have just shown you about how emotions make the body sick has a powerful and equally real reverse side. Positive emotions heal, not metaphorically, biochemically, measurably, documentedly. Gratitude, for example, has been studied in dozens of research projects over the last 2 decades. Dr. Robert Emmons from the University of California demonstrated that people who practice gratitude consistently show higher levels of immunoglobulin A, one of the immune system's primary antibodies, better sleep quality, lower blood pressure, and a lower incidence of inflammatory diseases. Gratitude is not merely a moral virtue. It is a health intervention. Love and social connection also have impressive data. A study from Brigham Young University, published in PLOS Medicine with a sample of more than 300,000 people, concluded that social isolation and loneliness increase the risk of premature mortality by 26%, an impact comparable to smoking. On the other hand, people with strong emotional bonds live an average of 7 years longer. Forgiveness, and this is one many people resist, also has compelling biological data. Research from Stanford University shows that the act of forgiving reduces cortisol levels, lowers resting heart rate, and relieves chronic muscle tension, especially in the neck and shoulders. Holding a grudge, from a physiological standpoint, is like taking a slow-release poison. Arcturian medicine teaches us that emotions are the language the body uses to communicate with consciousness. When an emotion is felt, recognized, and integrated, it fulfills its purpose and dissolves. When it is suppressed, denied, or ignored, it keeps circulating, literally, through the organism, searching for an outlet. And if it does not find one, it creates one. This is not an invitation to become a slave to your emotions, or to justify any behavior with "I'm feeling this way." It is an invitation to develop what the Arcturians call stellar emotional intelligence, the capacity to feel fully without being swept away, to recognize what is present without repressing or dramatizing, to process and release rather than accumulate. And the first step toward this is to stop treating your emotions as inconveniences. They are, first and foremost, messages from your own body trying to keep you in health. Gratitude and intention journal. Programming the field before sleep. The last practice of the day is also one of the most powerful for consolidating positive emotional memory and regulating nighttime cortisol. Before sleeping, write down 3 things for which you are genuinely grateful that day, regardless of size. They can be simple things: a good meal, a meaningful conversation, the fact that you breathed well throughout the day. Then write an intention for the following day. Not a to-do list, but a quality you want to express. It can be patience, joy, presence, courage. Dr. Andrew Weil, physician and Harvard researcher specializing in integrative medicine, describes this practice as one of the most effective for regulating the nervous system before sleep. Reducing activity in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is precisely the axis that governs the stress response. 6 practices. Implemented gradually with consistency, they represent a complete transformation in the functioning of your organism, not only at the physical level, but at the level of the biofield, of frequency, of the stellar intelligence that inhabits every cell of your body. The future of medicine lies in the past of the stars. What is coming throughout this video? We have walked a path together that began with the multidimensional structure of the body. passed through frequency as medicine, the biofield, food as light code, emotions as biology, and arrived at concrete practices you can apply today. But now I want to show you something that will connect all of these points in a way you may not yet have imagined. Medicine is changing, and it is changing in a direction that, for those who follow Arcturian teachings, feels less like a novelty and more like a reunion. Let us begin with a piece of information that few people know: the Human Genome Project, completed in 2003 after 13 years of work and billions of dollars invested, revealed something that left scientists deeply unsettled. Only 2% of human DNA encodes proteins, what conventional science understood as the real function of DNA. The other 98% was initially called, in a remarkably telling way, junk DNA. A label that said far more about the limits of scientific knowledge at the time than about the nature of DNA itself. Today, we know that this so-called junk DNA is anything but junk. Research from the ENCODE project, the largest scientific effort to map the functional genome, demonstrated that much of this DNA acts as an extraordinarily sophisticated regulatory system, responding to environmental signals, electromagnetic frequencies, emotional states, and even conscious intentions. In other words, your DNA is dynamic, responsive, and, to a certain degree, programmable. The Arcturians describe this non-coding DNA as the stellar records of the body, layers of ancestral, galactic, and evolutionary information that lie dormant in most human beings, awaiting the right conditions to be activated. Conditions that include exactly what we have discussed throughout this video: elevated frequency, emotional balance, living food, silence, conscious intention. This converges with research in epigenetics, perhaps the most revolutionary area of biology in the 21st century. Dr. Bruce Lipton, cellular biologist trained at Stanford University and author of The Biology of Belief, demonstrated experimentally that the cellular environment, not a fixed genetic code, is the primary determinant of cell behavior. In his words, genes do not control biology. It is the signals from the environment that turn genes on and off, fire, and those signals include thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and frequencies, exactly the vocabulary of Arcturian medicine. Conventional medicine is, slowly but irreversibly, incorporating this perspective. Integrative and functional medicine, which treats the patient as an interconnected system rather than a collection of isolated symptoms, is growing exponentially. In the United States, more than 42% of university hospitals already offer integrative medicine programs, and the movement is spreading globally, with governments and health systems beginning to recognize practices that were once considered fringe. Frequency therapy is emerging as one of the most promising frontiers of medicine. Royal Rife, an American researcher of the 1930s, had already identified that certain electromagnetic frequencies could destroy specific pathogens without causing damage to healthy tissue. Work that was marginalized for decades and is now beginning to be revalidated. Biotechnology companies in Israel, Germany, and Japan are developing frequency-based medical devices for the treatment of tumors, antibiotic-resistant infections, and neurodegenerative diseases. Artificial intelligence applied to medicine is identifying disease patterns from data that go far beyond traditional tests, including variations in the heart's electromagnetic field, voice patterns, facial microexpressions, and gut microbiome analysis. In other words, medical AI is learning to read the human biofield, even without using that name. And perhaps the most fascinating development of all, the neuroscience of consciousness is reaching frontiers that challenge the materialist model of the mind. Anesthesiologist and researcher Stuart Hameroff, in partnership with physicist Roger Penrose, developed the theory of orchestrated objective reduction, which proposes that human consciousness emerges from quantum processes in the microtubules of nerve cells. In simple terms, consciousness is not merely a product of the brain. It is a quantum phenomenon that connects the human being to a field of information far greater than the physical body. The Arcturians call this field galactic consciousness, Quantum physics calls it the zero-point field. The Vedic tradition calls it Akasha. The names differ. The reality they describe is the same. What does all of this mean for you in practice? It means that the choices you make today, what you eat, how you breathe, how you process your emotions, with what intention you live, are not merely lifestyle matters. They are direct interventions in your DNA, your biofield, the expression of your consciousness. You are not a passive organism at the mercy of inherited genes and opportunistic viruses. You are a being of stellar intelligence with the capacity to self-regulate, self-repair, and self-transform when you have the right tools and the knowledge to use them. The medicine of the future will not treat disease. It will cultivate health. It will not wait for collapse to act. It will monitor and calibrate the field continuously, preventively, and personally. It will not look only at the physical body. It will consider all dimensions of the being: emotional, energetic, mental, spiritual. That future is arriving faster than we imagine. And the Arcturians, with all their galactic consciousness and stellar intelligence, gave us the map long ago. Now it is up to us to have the courage and the awareness to follow it. The body you inhabit is more than you imagine. We have reached the end of this video. And if you made it this far, I want you to know that already says a great deal about you. It means you take your health seriously, that you are willing to expand the way you see your own body, and that you understand caring for yourself goes far beyond medical appointments and routine tests. Let us do a summary of what we covered together today. We learned that the human body is a multidimensional interface, not merely physical, but emotional, energetic, and conscious. That treating only the physical symptom is treating half the problem. We discovered that frequency is medicine, that every cell in your body vibrates at a specific frequency when healthy, and that sounds, intentions, words, and emotions directly impact that vibration. We understood what the biofield is: the electromagnetic field that surrounds and permeates your body, that precedes the physical manifestation of disease, and that can be restored through simple and accessible practices. We saw how food is like code, that what you eat does not merely nourish, but programs your DNA, activates or deactivates genes, and carries a vibrational frequency that your organism processes with every meal. We understood that emotions are biology, that suppressed anger, chronic fear, and unresolved sadness manifest in the body in measurable and documented ways, and that gratitude, love, and forgiveness heal with the same biochemical efficiency. We received 6 concrete stellar intelligence practices for daily life: coherent breathing, conscious sunbathing, intentional hydration, movement as frequency, intentional silence, and a gratitude and intention journal. And we saw the future of medicine converging with what the Arcturians have long been teaching: epigenetics, bioelectronics, vibrational medicine, neuroscience of consciousness, all pointing in the same direction: the human being as a living, intelligent, and self-regulating system. Before we close, I want to leave you with a practical protocol, what the Arcturians would call a daily calibration routine. Simple, applicable, and transformative when practiced with consistency. Upon waking, 5 minutes of coherent breathing. Plunge 500 ml of water with intention. In the morning, 15 to 20 minutes of conscious sun exposure, without sunglasses in the first few minutes, with arms and legs uncovered. During the day, 1 meal with as many living, colourful foods as possible, at least 30 minutes of movement, walking, dancing, stretching. Moments of pause without screens. At night, 5 minutes of gentle stretching, 10 minutes of intentional silence. Gratitude journal with 3 entries and 1 intention for the following day. 7 days practicing this with consistency and you will feel the difference in your body. 30 days and the people around you will start to notice. 90 days and your lab results may confirm what you will already be feeling: that your organism has a capacity for healing and regeneration far greater than anyone ever told you. You do not need to wait for the medicine of the future to live with health right now. The Arcturian teachings remind us with all their stellar intelligence, that the greatest healing laboratory that exists is inside you, and it is available, responsive, and waiting for your attention. Take care of your field. Take care of your frequency. Take care of your body. Not merely as a machine that needs to function, but as the sacred and multidimensional instrument it truly is. If this video brought value to you, do me a favor. Hit the like button right now. That simple gesture helps this content reach more people who need this information. Share it with someone who is looking for a different way to care for their health. It could be a family member, a friend, someone you know is struggling and has not yet found the answers they need. In the comments, tell me, which chapter impacted you the most today? Which practice are you going to start applying first? I genuinely want to read what you have to say. Every comment tells me what to create for you in upcoming videos. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. Every week we bring new content on health, consciousness, and well-being, always with depth, always with a scientific foundation, always with you and your family in mind. Until the next video, take good care of yourself. You deserve health in all of its dimensions.